a winnable round of 16 and looking forward to a quarter final, but that's put manners on us, and it's now an entirely different proposition.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough draw. You look at what Munster were going to look at coming in here. I think with the way that the draw is built, it was more than likely going to be a French club. There was a slim possibility it could have been one of the English teams, but that was taken off the table pretty early. It's a difficult draw. Look, Toulouse are playing incredibly well. They have lots of very, very good players. I think, being at home, it's not really a massive advantage in the COVID world with no fans. So that's going to be an incredibly difficult game. And even then, the draw for the next round is pretty difficult as well, where Munster are going to be away from home against either Wasps or Clermont. So, I mean, look, it's very, very difficult. But, there's a bit of value to having big, difficult games too, I look at this game against Toulouse, it is an opportunity to take on these guys. You want to try and take on the best. That, to me, is a really good opportunity for Munster. Whether they'll be able to win or not is another thing, but it's the type of big game that I think that this group will look forward to. And it's something for me that, with a Pro 14 final the week before, it's the kind of big game we want to see.
Talking about those kind of big games that we want to see Munster partaking in, and we want to see in the business end of seasons. How equipped do you think this Munster side are to start edging back towards being competitive at the latter end of European competition?
I think it hinges on fitness. You look at RG Snyman getting back to full fitness. I mean, however long that's going to take is going to be very important. Joey Carberry getting back to his best is a huge factor in Munster improving as well. Keeping guys like Damien Delende fit. Those guys, if you can get all of those guys playing and performing pretty regularly, I think Munster have a pretty good team. I think you look at the guys that Munster have, like the Ty Byrne performing incredibly well, Chris Farrell, Conor Murray, Craig Casey, like I said, Joey Carberry, CJ Stander, all these guys. I think Munster certainly have a squad that can compete, but again, it'll depend on how many of those pieces can you get on the field and keep on the field. That's going to be hugely important. Now, I think this game against Toulouse might be a little bit too soon for an RG Snyman, but again, you look at Joey Carberry continuing to improve, continuing to build fitness. I think there's lots of stuff to be positive about from a Munster perspective, especially once they get the guys back from test level. It's going to be difficult, but I think Munster have a squad that is capable of competing with the very best.
Ronan, I suppose, what's your take on that draw, and are you looking forward to this big clash?
It's an exciting draw. As much as it's a very kind of challenging fixture for Munster, I think it will be just a massive match. We've seen Toulouse, like some of the stars of the French team with them. Dupont, scrum half, is going to have a massive influence in that match. Entamax with them as well, the French out half, who's back from injury this week, I think. So with those two at the core of their team, it's going to be a very challenging match for Munster. They have other lads like Cheslin Cole, who's playing with them, the South African winger, and Charlie Famuina, the All Black prop. So they have an extremely talented squad, but I'd kind of like to just kind of say again what Tom said there, which was that Munster do have their own weapons as well. Our players have been performing very well for Ireland Six Nations, like Ty Byrne, CJ Stander, have continued their usual outstanding form, and it'll just be a massive match. It may come down to fitness, as Tom said. Joey Carberry without half might be a big plus for us. But yeah, I can see it's going to be a tight match either way. It won't be like the previous Munster-Toulouse quarterfinals from the last 5-10 years. I think it'll be a much more challenging task than that, because Toulouse have improved so much and they're top of the top 14 now, I think, on 66 points. So it'll be a very challenging game, but an exciting one as well.
Just to look at the draw for the knockout stages of the competition: Munster, Toulouse, Gloucester, La Rochelle, Wasps versus Clermont, Exeter versus Lyon, Leinster versus Toulon, Bordeaux versus Bristol, Racing, Edinburgh, and Scarlets taking on Sale Sharks. So there are some huge ties there, but you would, I suppose, expect to see, some. I don't know, Tom. If you were to look at the breakdown of those kind of 8 games, who do you think are in a good position? A lot of those French teams are very powerful sides with big squads, and when you consider the toll that for a country that has more clubs, the Six Nations will probably have less of effect on the French teams when you consider that we're going back-to-back Six Nations games over the next couple of weeks. I think we're probably going to suffer a bit more from the aftermath of the Six Nations than any of the French clubs following the European round of 16.
Yeah, I mean, from a Toulouse perspective, they're going to be paying a lot of attention to when that France versus Scotland game is rescheduled for. If that's held the week after the last Six Nations game, that could be a difficult one for them. But you look at Racing, for example, they seem to have gotten a relatively handy enough draw. So I think there's a possibility there for them to do well in this year's tournament. They, lost in the final last year, as we were shown in excruciating detail during that Champions Cup draw, which was just painful. But you look at the likes of La Rochelle, I think, are well positioned. I think that there's an opportunity there for them. Sale, I like the team that Sale have constructed. They've got a few injury issues, but they've got a lot of quality. I think they could be a real landmine in this year's tournament. You look at their game against Scarlets, that'll be a tough one for Scarlets, but I think if Sale can get beyond that stage with the guys they have available, I think they're a really dangerous team in this year's tournament, and not a whole lot of people are talking about them, but I think there could be an opportunity for them, given this, on the side of the draw they're at, to go quite far, I think the Six Nations is going to have a big impact on the Irish clubs. They are disproportionately more affected than the English and the French clubs. The expectation for the Irish provinces always is to challenge at the top end of Europe. That's not really something that the Welsh clubs or the Scottish clubs really have had to contend with. But you look at, Munster and Leinster. Leinster, I think in particular, will have a lot of responsibilities when it comes to, the Irish Six Nations squad over the next 2 weeks. So that in itself creates a cluster of games, because this is going to be a very condensed season. You look at the Six Nations, there's 2 very big weekends coming up. There's Pro 14 action happening as well. Then you have a Pro 14 final. Then you're straight into Europe. So it's going to be very, very difficult to manage from a minutes perspective. So that's going to be something that the provinces are going to have to navigate. I think that there will be decisions have to be made over the Pro 14 final, who plays in that, who then is available for the week after. The IRFU want to make sure that these players don't take up long-term injuries. That's incredibly damaging to them. So that's something that's going to have to be navigated. But it is something that must be navigated. I think from the Irish province's perspective, getting into a stage now after that Six Nations will give them an opportunity to, take stock for a week and then launch into that European Champions Cup, knockout stage, which is going to be very difficult. Then straight into the Rainbow Cup. It's going to be difficult, and it's going to be something that's going to take a lot of management, I think, and it's going to be something that will become a larger conversation as we get closer to those games.
Speaking of pathways to get the latter stages, Munster confirmed their Pro 14 final date with Leinster over the weekend with that win over Connacht. Tom, it was patchy, but look, they did what they had to do. The line-out was a concern, though, last weekend.
Very much so. I think that Connacht really, really targeted that game. I think somebody in the presser today said that this game was almost like a semi-final with the way that Connacht approached it. Almost all of their top guys playing, all the guys who were fit and available. I think Quinn Roux was missing. But you look at the way that Connacht approached this game incredibly seriously. They knew that they had to win this game to have any chance of overhauling Munster for that final spot. Munster knew a win of any colour would nail that down. So I think Connacht came at this game with a very, very specific game plan. They like to kick anyway, but they kicked quite a bit in this game. Kicking to compete, as in not necessarily like a box kicking strategy, but kicking to pressure, with Jack Carty and others being the ones to put a lot of length on the ball. So they did very well to pressure Munster's exits. They did a huge job on Munster's lineout, where they competed on almost every lineout that was that took place outside the Connacht 22. That's hugely difficult to live with, and I think Munster's lineout suffered under that kind of pressure, which they'll be disappointed with. But with that approach, you give up stuff elsewhere, and I think that Munster's work in the maul, especially when they mauled into the space left behind the jump pods that Connacht put up, consistently drew penalties. It consistently allowed Munster to kick down deep into their half. I think that's a win that will actually stack up as being, that'll stack up as being quite a good one when you look back at how strong Connacht were, and I think how good Connacht are. You look at how good they are. Like I think like with Ultan Delan, Gavin Thornbury had a huge game. You had Jack Carthy, Aki, Porch, O'Halloran. They really, really went after this game. And Munster, minus the likes of Stander, Murray, Byrne, a lot of important guys, I think they navigated it quite well. Didn't play fantastically well, of course, but they still had the wherewithal to score points when they were on the table and take that opportunity to win the game when it presented itself. I think that was pretty strong. And I think that, it was an adequate reward for what has been a really well navigated conference season by Munster. Really difficult games, those two at the start of the season against a very strong Scarlet side away from home and quite a strong Edinburgh side in Thomond Park. Those two wins there were hugely valuable and have really they've been the point of difference for Munster since then. So I think that's something.
Yeah, we saw the perils of losing a home game against Edinburgh last season, in that it was that game below in Musgrave Park that we got beat by Edinburgh, and it just put us under the pump for a lot of the year and meant we had that away semi-final route through the RDS. I suppose, Ronan, your takings on that Connacht game before we move on. We got the win, but there were some serious things that Munster will need to work on looking down the line at that Leinster game.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the reaction would have been kind of talking about where Munster did fall down, and it was kind of like a critical aftermath of that match, because like a lot of what Munster did was inaccurate. I think, as Tom points out, the line out just malfunctioned completely, and then Munster's halfbacks, Casey and Healy, didn't have their strongest matches either. That said, it is important to recognise Connacht's performance, because I thought Connacht put in a huge performance themselves. The amount of pressure they put Munster under at the set piece, their kicking game, and particularly pressuring Munster's exit strategy was really important. And you talk about Munster going into these Pro 14 semi-finals, Pro 14 finals, and being slightly undercooked, and when you meet Leinster, it's a whole other level. I think Connacht would have given a bit of a scare that, when your lineup is under that pressure, it's going to be problematic. Likewise, in your own 22, your exit has to be sharp, and you can't be affording to get blocked down the same way Craig Casey was on a couple of occasions, or will punish you. So I think when you look back, it's an important win for Munster. I think Munster will be happy with that win, considering how well Connacht played. I'd say Andy Friend be pretty impressed with how they executed his plan for that match in Thomond Park. And now, I think it's a good win for Munster. They can learn a lot from it, and hopefully they can go into that Leinster match and against Scarlets this weekend, just knowing that they're going to have to be more wary, they're going to have to be more at the line out, and nothing less will be sufficient against a higher quality of opposition.
Yeah, okay. Of course, we do have international rugby this weekend to look forward to as well, but we'll come back to that later in the week. I suppose, Tom, other news as well, in that Keith Earls has signed on the dotted line for another year.
Yeah, I think it's good news for Ireland and for Munster. You look at getting a guy like Keith Earls, he was he's closer to the end of his career than he is the start. I think that's fair enough to say. But the value that he can still produce, I mean, not just with his experience and not just with what he's able to do in the field, which I don't think there's been a massive precipitous drop with what Keith Earls has been producing, but it's what he gives off the field as well. That kind of stuff is incredibly valuable. And I think that we can sometimes get a little bit bogged down with the idea that guys who are in their 30s, that they become increasingly less valuable. I'm not sure that's true when you look at guys like how well Sexton performed at the age of, he was 33 or 34 when he won the World Player of the Year in 2018. You look at the ability of these guys to produce. If they're still performing, and I think that they are, then I think it's right that these guys are kept on. But when you look at like Sexton and Healy and Earls being put onto a one-year deal, this is a staging post between where Ireland and Munster are going and where they will end up eventually being. I think that signing a guy like Keith Earls or Sexton or Healy onto that one-year deal, I think that's sensible. I think that's good business. I think that it's the sort of thing that actually helps development rather than hinders it. And it's something that, it adds a type of value that it's a little bit more nuanced than, age north of 30 equals bad.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing, guys, as well, was the, confirmation that we will have the Pro 14 final the week after the final Six Nations game. So Ireland go Scotland this week and England the following week, and then another week turnaround into a Pro 14 final. And I suppose in line with the player welfare, I suppose, constraints placed upon the provinces, we could conceivably see a Pro 14 final short of, a lot of international guys. Leinster possibly without Ryan, Furlong, Porter, Sexton. Munster could be without the likes of Murray, Stander, Earls. So, Tom, does it take away from the possible final, or is it just one of the things that both provinces are going to have to get on with?
It's both. It does take away from the final if all the top guys are not playing. It can't not affect the spectacle of the final, which itself has been sort of not tainted, but it's just been in a condensed season. It's just sort of arrived all of a sudden, and it can kind of feel a little bit like an afterthought. I'm not sure that either side will be happy if they are, if they have enforced rotation, which is what this will be. But I think that it's something that is just, it comes with this particular season in general. It's going to be quite condensed. Not everybody can play all the minutes that they would like to. It's just going to be one of those things. So I think it's certainly a live possibility. These are two huge games coming up, by the way, for against Scotland and against England. Hugely physical contests. That's going to take a toll on guys. And there's only so much players can give week to week to week to week, especially when you're looking at rolling into the knockout stages, which the IRFU will look at as well and go, these are huge development moments as well in Europe, where the young players and the guys who are kind of involved at provincial level will have that step up into big pressure games against top French opposition. For Leinster, it's against Toulon, which will have a sort of a size and physical challenge that I don't think they've seen in I think really since the Saracens game. That Toulon pack to me looks pretty formidable. And you look at Munster against the likes of Toulouse, that's a huge challenge to the younger players who are there. And that's the sort of development minutes that the IRFU really pay attention to when it looks at, who are we going to look to try and step up to that next level? They show it in those games. So, look, there's going to be lots of opportunities for guys to show up and perform. The fellas who do will see not just their province doing well, but see themselves move up in the reckoning when it comes to that green jersey too. So it's going to be very, very difficult, but it's something that the IRFU will have to make tough decisions. The provinces will have to live with it, and that's just the reality of it. It doesn't mean it won't be disappointing if it does happen, but I think it's just the reality of the situation everybody finds themselves in.
Ronan, I'm going to put you under pressure with this one, and I'm going to get you to say Munster without their internationals or Leinster without their internationals. Who does it have the bigger knock-on effect on? And I suppose, we all know that Leinster do have more internationals than Munster currently. Are Munster fans kind of sitting at home going, you know what, if there is the enforced rotation, we'll take our chances and roll the dice with it?
It's a funny one because Leinster's strength and depth is so strong as well that the guys that they would have as substitutes aren't too far off the Irish internationals, I'd suggest. Whereas for Munster, maybe we are perhaps at that level at least maybe overly reliant on a CJ Stander or Tyke Byrne. So it might kind of equal or match each other in that respect. So yeah, I kind of, if as much as I kind of love to back Munster, I mean, if I've learned anything from the last 5-10 years, it's probably that Leinster will probably win this one. But Munster are making good strides, with Joey Carberry potentially coming back, and then hopefully finding full fitness in the next few weeks, with Snyman maybe coming back. Then I think we'll be at the next level with the Leinsters, with the Racing 92s, and we can look forward to the Champions Cup at least. But I think for that game, I wouldn't be entirely confident. It'll be close, don't get me wrong, and Munster will definitely put up to Leinster, and they were extremely close and perhaps should have won last time the two sides met in Thomond Park. But if I was to put a lot of money on it, I would say Leinster.
Tom, I think Ronan mistook that section for the heresy part of the podcast.
I think so, yeah.
But Tom, look, that Leinster game that's on the horizon, take out the internationals between, and the fact that Munster have now secured that Pro 14 spot. I suppose, what are you, if you're Johan van Graan and at Larkham and Roundtree, and you're sitting down for the next few weeks, what are you looking to do with the remaining Pro 14 games that Munster have? Is Joey Carberry's match fitness a priority? Is is looking at the likelihood of the combinations that you'll have to be using if the international players are gone for a final against Leinster. It's a very I don't think anyone will have had as much time to prepare for a final opposition. Knowing the team that you'll be playing in a final this far out. I mean, usually we have quarterfinals, semi-finals, and a final before we know exactly who we're facing, and that you could be facing any of three teams a couple of weeks out from the competition. In this case, we're 3 weeks out from it, and we already know the team that we're facing. We don't have any knockouts games to go in between. So how does that change things, what are Munster looking to do with those remaining weeks?
Well, I think Munster intellectually know how you would go about beating Leinster. I think the last couple of games have shown that they know how to get close, but it's been small moments in those games that have cost them. Missed penalties, missed kicks, opportunities that were there and not taken.
It's been execution, Tom, really, hasn't it, if we're to be blunt about it?
Look, I think Munster have shown that they know how to prevent Leinster from racking up a big score. A lot of that has to do with the kicking game. I think Munster have executed that well against Leinster the last couple of times they've played. But it's about penalties that you miss or that you don't take your opportunities. That's what I mean. Munster were beating Leinster up until the 70-something minute last time out, and then a poor penalty concession let them in. They took their chance. They scored. That's the kind of thing that you have to deny Leinster, and that's a mistake that Munster would have to take out of their game. Like, you look at Leinster, they've certainly been playing well, but I think if you look at their performances of this particular group against Dragons, against Glasgow, and then against Ulster, when the opposition have had 15 men on the field, I think that Leinster have looked a little vulnerable, certainly against Dragons and certainly at points against Glasgow. But Glasgow shipped a red card. Dragons at one stage they went through a period where they had 2 yellow card periods in the second half. And against Ulster at the weekend, they had Ulster had a red card and a yellow card, and a few other dodgy decisions went their way as well. So you look at that and you go, I think that this Leinster team are certainly beatable. I think there's something that Munster will, given that they know how to beat the Category 1 Leinster team, I think they will have a plan that could beat this Leinster team too. But it comes down to execution. I think the last 2 or 3 games come down to Munster not taking their opportunities, and we all know there was a few missed kicks, a few penalties that didn't go into touch. They're the kind of moments you cannot cough up against Leinster because they're just too good. Like, you can't make those kind of mistakes where you give them position even anywhere near your 22 because they're just so good they will take those opportunities. I think Munster certainly have a knowledge of what to do in these next couple of games. They will have to rotate some guys in. They will look to try and prepare for that game coming in a few weeks down the line. That in itself can be not ideal because it can kind of extend your thinking a little bit because you've got to take in, Scarlets, Benetton, and then Leinster. But it'll allow them to kind of bring in some younger players, give them some minutes, refresh the squad a little bit, get everybody as fresh as they can because there's lots of rugby coming up for a lot of these guys. So I think in that regard, it could be a bonus. But it's all about not shipping any injuries. For me, I'd be getting the likes of Damien Delende, Jean Klein, putting those guys into cold storage because I think they're guys who are going to be needed for that final and they're going to be needed in that European Champions Cup knockout series. So, look, it's going to be very, very difficult, but I think Munster can use this next 2 weeks as a little development period and work on little bits and pieces that they're looking to build for that Leinster game. But make no mistake, it's going to be hugely difficult, and whether or not it'll be possible, I think, depends on whether Joey Carberry is fully fit and firing and whether Munster have those guys, the likes of Matt Gallagher, the likes of Jean Klein, Damien Delende, Chris Farrell. They're going to be hugely important in making sure that our Munster rather can actually get this over the line. Because this is a huge opportunity for Munster to win a first trophy in 10 years. I mean, whatever about a shortened season, that alone would be massive for the group. So it's going to be interesting, but I think it's something that it'll take a little bit of balancing between game time, cohesion, and using minutes in your wider squad. Yeah,
and I think you touched on it there, Tom. It's going to take a lot of balancing, and we all see, we know what the likes of DLND can give you, same with Klein and a few of these other guys. So it's probably maybe, like you said, best to err on the side of caution with the guys who we know what they give us. We don't need to see a whole lot from them. If we can keep them reasonably fresh for the final push, you'd imagine that would be more important. But Ronan, I put it to you, is this the most important month of Johan van Graan's tenure at the province? That, I personally, I think it is. I think that, what he's been speaking about since he has come to the province, it seems to be crystallizing in the next few weeks. And, there is a bit of pressure on now, because expectancy with Munster has crept up over the last few meetings with Leinster. We're getting closer. And there's always been, not a sob story, but there's always been, or there has been, a few kind of shooting yourselves in the foot moments over the last few games with Leinster that we really just want to get out of the system now. And I put it to you that it's a fairly pressurized 4 weeks.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think Munster that they have assembled is definitely stronger than previous seasons when we have gotten to these kind of stages of the year. So especially if we have Joey Carberry, Delende, such an outstanding international player, we should have the full deck of cards to now go and compete in these kind of final matches, to compete in the Champions Cup. And I think for Van Graan, this would have been his, as you said, Raf, this would be his full image of what he would have wanted Munster. There isn't too many excuses now. Before we went into games against maybe like Saracens in the Champions Cup semi-final, and the subs they brought on were on a whole other level. Now with the combination of the youth that's come through, there's some outstanding youth products in the likes of Craig Casey, Ben Healy, all of these guys, and then combining them with some excellent recruitment. Matt Gallagher's back from injury now, as Tom pointed out. So we ourselves do have a very strong team of players. Now it's a case of giving them a suitable game plan. He has 3 weeks to prepare them for Leinster, of course. So getting a suitable game plan, getting the best players on the pitch, and then it will probably depend on how well we prepare set piece, how well we prepare line out, and then basically whether the player that he selects, whether it's at hooker, I thought Kevin O'Byrne was missed the last time we played Leinster, or the player that he picks it out half. That's what it could come down to, just simply kicks and execution at the line out, and whoever's running the line out as well. So that's what it'll come down to, and hopefully now Munster will shake off that tag of not having any trophies for the last 10 years. And this is a great opportunity for Johan van Graan and his CV, really.
Tom, what are you doing on the Patreon page in advance of, or following on from the Champions Cup draw today and looking ahead to the weekend?
Well, I've got 2 previews coming this week, looking at the Ireland game and the upcoming Munster game. I've also got a little series I'm starting on the kind of different structures that are used in modern attack in rugby, and the influence that the 10 has in the different structures and the roles and the requirements that they're needed. That's all coming on TRK Premium, which you can get on patreon.com/3redkings.
Okay, guys, listen, thanks a mil for everybody for joining us this week, and we'll be back towards the end of the week with a look ahead to the 6th preview.